Let's go off the grid. Okay. Let's go off the grid. Okay. I know that you really want to put your phone away. Yeah. Let's go off the grid.
Hello, and welcome to Off the Grid, a podcast about reclaiming our attention from the algorithms and building beautiful businesses and creative practices that support us in so many ways. I'm your host, Amelia Freebie, and on this show, I share stories, strategies, and experiments for sharing your work and making money online with radical generosity and energetic sovereignty. If you're brand new to the show, welcome. I am so glad you're here. We're currently in season 9 of the podcast, so there's a lovely back catalog for you to explore, but you've picked a really beautiful episode to begin with, because today I am welcoming back Cody Cook-Parrott. Before I tell you more about Cody and what we're going to talk about in this episode, I want to make sure you know that this show is paired with a free resource called the Leaving Social Media Toolkit. That toolkit includes the 3 tools that I used to leave social media almost 5 years ago now, which are a 5-step plan for leaving any social platform, including strategy and reflection prompts that you can move through in your own time. It also includes a list of 100 ways to share your work and life without social media, so that if you decide to make this decision, you don't feel like there's no way to meet people, make friends, sell your offerings, make money. You can do all of that without social media, and there's not just one way. I've given you a list of 100 ways to do that. And then the third tool in the toolkit is a creative marketing ideas database, so that as you listen to this show, you can keep track of the things you want to try, and then use that database to collect inspiration and even make plans for when you will do those things. You can get all of that totally for free. It's linked in the show notes in every single episode of this podcast, or you can go right to offthegrid.fun/toolkit to download it today. That toolkit has been downloaded by almost 5,000 people, which is really wild for me to consider as someone who started this show with a tiny, tiny, tiny audience 4 years ago. And I just share that to say that I'm so grateful if you get it, and I hope that it really supports you. It's supported a lot of people, not just in leaving social media, but in changing their relationship to these tools and apps. And that's really what you're going to hear me talk about today with our guest, Cody Cook-Parrott. So head to the show notes and grab the free toolkit while I tell you a bit more about who Cody is and what they're up to. Cody Cook-Parrott is a writer, artist, and movement practitioner who builds simple structures that help artists make work. Their focus is attention, creative ecosystems, and research. Cody first came on the podcast in the summer of 2024 to talk about their tumultuous relationship with Instagram and how growing their platform to over 80,000 followers did a lot for their career, but also really flared their social media addiction. Then they joined me again last fall to talk about the process of writing their new book, The Practice of Attention, and to explain why they deleted their Instagram account entirely. This go-round, Cody joins me for a really beautiful, heartfelt, philosophical, and practical conversation about why attention is a necessary part of creativity. And together we talk about why creative attention is different than distraction or focus, how tending to your attention can help you finish the many projects you might start. And we share more about how we've experimented with tech breaks and tools like the Wisephone and the Brick. We have a fun little chat about which apps grab us and which ones don't. I get really grabbed by YouTube. Cody doesn't get so grabbed by Pinterest. And we end with a beautiful reflection on how stepping back from social media can empower us to actively resist fascism and political violence in the US where we live and around the world. I love talking to Cody, and I'm so glad that they came back on the show for the 3rd time. I hope we have many more conversations. I consider them someone I want to talk to every single year of this podcast. And if you enjoy this episode, I really, really hope that you will buy their new book, The Practice of Attention. As this comes out, you can still pre-order it. It releases officially on March 17th, 2026. I've read it. It's beautiful, and I know you're going to want to get it. So head to the link in the show notes to get your own copy while you listen. And for now, enjoy the third appearance of a Cody Cook-Parrott on Off the Grid podcast. Hi, Cody. Welcome back to Off the Grid.
Hi, Amelia. Thanks for having me.
I am thrilled to have you. This is your three-peat appearance.
My hat trick, as they say in Heated Rivalry,
Yes, your Off the Grid hat trick. And I am especially excited to have you on today because we are celebrating the imminent launch of your new book, The Practice of Attention. How are you feeling about it?
I'm feeling really good and really ready. Traditional publishing is such a long process, and I started thinking about this book and writing the proposal for it in 2021. So I'm just very ready for it to not be mine anymore and to be in the people's hands.
Yeah, traditional publishing, the timeline is always so extended between, there's the part where you're living the stuff that goes in the book, and then you have to write the whole book, and then they edit the book, and then you rewrite the book, and then it goes to design. And there's so many elements that by the time the book is coming out, you've been living with it for so long. And then now you're opening up to all of this perception and feedback on things that have been in deep process for you for a long time. So I'd love to start by hearing a bit more about that process. And I'm so curious, where would you pinpoint the origin of the practice of attention for you? How far back does this book go?
Yeah, it must have been in 2021. I took a 4-month break from social media, from Instagram specifically, and I deactivated. And, I'd already written about and talked a lot about social media addiction. I had made a zine about it. But at this time, it was really when I was like, I want to write a book that's about not being on Instagram at all. And as many listeners know, it took me a few more years to actually leave Instagram. And so that's, I think, something to be said just about how tight of a hold it can have on us. But it was in 2021, and the book's original title was The Artist's Attention, because I was really so interested in, I was around a lot of musicians at the time, and, my brother's a musician, so many of my friends are musicians, and just talking to so many of them about that kind of long process of thinking about the songs, writing the songs, making the songs, recording the songs, the demos, the mixing, mastering, putting the album out, and how much musicians also rely on social media to tell people about their music, but how many musicians I know who were just so burnt out from using it. And so, yeah, at the time I was thinking specifically about artists, but the more that I worked on the book and the more that I talked to people, it was clear that it was even more so creative business owners, but even people who use Instagram for their hobbies or their exercise routine or whatever it is. So, yeah, it's been many years of this sort of unfolding of the material.
Yeah, I think that's so resonant with my own experience of writing about attention because, as listeners know, Off the Grid is a podcast for creative business owners and self-employed people, largely. I mean, anyone can listen. You're all welcome here. But I talk a lot about business and marketing. But when I went to write a book about attention, it just felt like a ubiquitous topic for everyone, especially when it came to anyone using social media. But I love that you had this initial focus on artists that I think follows through in the manuscript now. I think even in the beginning of it, you talk about how you're writing this book as an artist, not as a scholar of attention or, a journalist even, because we've seen those books, right? We have Johann Hari's Stolen Focus. We have Chris Hayes' The Siren's Call, if I'm getting that name correct. We even have my book, which is more of the philosopher's view or something like that. What do you think makes attention so important for artists? Where is this inherent link between attention and creativity?
Well, I believe in two things. One, I think art can be made in 10-minute spurts. So I think so much about parents and caregivers and people who are working 9 to 5s, and they have to fit in their creative practice in these small little chunks of time. So I don't mean to say you always need extended amounts of time, but I also think that artists often do need extended periods of time to work on something, whether that's a painting or composing something or ceramics or tending to a batch of herbs. It's like there's that need to sort of go in for hours at a time and get lost in our creative practice. And I think that is what we've lost from social media. It's just we've started like you only have to create enough to take the grid picture to throw it up and say, look, I made something. We've like lost getting lost in the process. And I think that's what I missed so much. And what I'm still rebuilding is that meandering is I want to meander through my creative practice and creative work and see what emerges.
Yeah. Oh, I love this so much. What's coming up for me is I feel like you're sort of tracing this path of creative attention that is somewhere between like distraction and intention. I think that's really interesting. And it's not a way I see people talk about attention a lot. It's not even necessarily how I talk about it, because I think often when people talk about attention, they like see distraction as the opposite, right? You're like, you're either paying attention or you're distracted. And that's like the only two modes that we have. Or they make the move that maybe I make more of, which is like with your attention, it's either like you have no intention for it, it's unintentional, or you like bring that attention. That's the sort of distinction I try to make with like paying attention and giving attention. But I'm hearing you say there's like a third path, which is this sort of creative attention, which is about that wandering. It's more about like creating intentional space to let your attention be unintentional, but not distracted.
Yeah, one of the first online classes I taught, I started teaching online in 2017. And in 2019, I taught a class called Cultivating Creative Attention. So maybe that was really the birth of the book idea in some ways. But yes, I think that those words, creative attention, which I want to say I channeled or maybe borrowed or we co-created with Jacqueline Suskin in like a session when I was doing a residency at a space that they were running. And it really is the attention that is required to finish a creative project. I'm so glad you're asking me this because I'm like, I don't even know if this is really in the book as much as that is what the book is for in a lot of ways, is to tend to our attention so that we can finish writing a book, finish a series of drawings for an art show. It's like I'm thinking a lot about like finishing an album. Like I'm thinking about finishing big projects and big pieces of work. And how do we cultivate enough attention to do those kinds of things, which has deeply changed for me since leaving social media.
I feel like conversations around attention focus so much on like, actually conversations around creativity writ large focus so much on like the spark or like finding the inspiration, but you're really seeing attention as the key to like the culmination of a project, to actually making it to that like proverbial finish line.
Yeah, I get sparks of inspiration. I do, but so much of what I really create and make is about the deep tending. I like the metaphor of like sweeping the steps of the temple for the muse, whether the muse comes or not. It's like we sweep the temple every day, whether that's doing your morning pages or some sort of creative act. But yeah, it's really about, I think that looking back on 2025, mostly being off social media, I really saw myself finish some bigger, longer projects.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that. So last time you were on the show, you shared a bit about how editing your book and reworking the material, like taking yourself through the material, really made clear to you that you wanted to actually leave social media and delete your Instagram, which you did in the fall of last year as we're recording this. I would love an update on that. Like you said, you finished some big projects since. Like, what has unfolded since you like truly closed the doors on that drain on your attention?
I mean, one thing that comes to mind, I'm in the midst of getting my MFA in creative writing, and last semester in school was so much easier. It was so much easier for me to read the material and write and, work on a lot of just quiet, private projects I'm working on through that program. And so that was something I noticed. I finished this show of quilts last year, which I think I technically still had Instagram while I was finishing them, but I was pretty much not using it. I think I set it up, my account up for deletion right around the opening of that show. And yeah, just a lot of just like behind the scenes work, redoing my website and launching different classes and teaching, and just, my ideas just feel a little bit sparklier in a way that feels nice. And yeah, it's not like anything so epic as much as I am less distracted. I reach for the phone a lot less these days.
Yeah, I was wondering about also the dailiness of this. Do you find yourself still pulled toward distraction, even if it's not on your phone? Because this is something I struggle with, even having been off of social media for 5 years, is sometimes I still want to distract, dissociate, not be present. And I still pick up my phone, except now I just play the block game instead of scrolling social media. So I'm so curious, does this happen for you too?
Yes. And, this is a big part of the book in a lot of ways, is talking about distraction not being a horrible thing. I'm like the next guy. I love to watch a bad reality TV show. I love to watch a good reality TV show. I don't know. I love to play Animal Crossing on occasion. I have my little things that I love to do, but I'm thinking about scrolling. 10 minutes of Animal Crossing is just doing one thing. 10 minutes of scrolling on my phone of Instagram is seeing hundreds of opinions and ideas and feelings and death and business and happiness. It gives me chills, So I think distracting yourself with one thing for a set amount of time is so much better for me. It is much less fracturing to do one little distracting thing for a while than to go towards social media. So that's what I find is better. It's sometimes I reach for my phone just the same on some days, when I'm low on dopamine. I have experimented twice now with having the Wisephone. I tried it again earlier this year or end of last year, and I really love it. I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to know more about it. But because the biggest thing is you can't have email on the phone. And I think that's maybe still my weakness, is I know you can just delete the app of mail on your phone. I'm aware.
But then you can log in the browser.
Then you can log in. And then my laptop's just open all day. And I'm I'm checking it over here. So yeah, I will say that's maybe my weak spot, is email on the phone, which is why the Wisephone was a really nice break. And I'll definitely consider using it again.
Yeah, I appreciate kind of both points you made there. On the latter, I also struggle with keeping email off my phone. I have deleted the apps, but then I'll just open up my phone browser and log in there and check my email. It feels very hard to resist for me sometimes. And I have never used the Wisephone or any of the other sort of dumb phones, as they call them. But I did get a brick device last year. And what I use it for is I lock myself out of all of my work-related apps. So no email, no Voxer, no Notion, no business bank account, no QuickBooks, none of that. It's all locked on the brick. And I used it actually over my winter break. There was a week and a half where I fully locked my phone out of the brick, or out of all of my work apps, and it worked quite well. I think the thing I like most about the brick is it doesn't feel like I'm like outsourcing my desires to an app to like discipline me or something. I use it every so often when I just need a little bit of a boost to actually like retrain my brain, reshift my habits, have that like assist. I don't use it in a daily way. Not that that's better or worse, but I find that that's how I've been using it. And it's working well for just sort of the occasional moments when I get really sucked in and just need like a hard no boundary with my phone.
Yeah, I go through waves with the brick where I've used it where, I like keep it in a certain configuration for like a week or then day to day. One thing I do love about it is you can block iMessage. And so you can really turn your phone into like a landline, like where the only thing it does is ring. And so I've liked that if I'm like, okay, I need my phone because my girlfriend is going to call me and she's out, or I told so-and-so we would talk on the phone or whatever. But sometimes just texting people can be a distraction for me. So I do think that's a cool thing about the brick is you can block iMessage and texting.
Yeah, I didn't know you could do that, but I can imagine myself using it, particularly on some weekends when I want to be offline and then instead just spend, 4 hours voice messaging people I love.
I can't remember who asked me this recently, but I was talking to them about the brick and they were like, can't you just turn your phone off? And I was like, okay, let's chill out here, but it's like, yes. And if you do want to have access to certain apps or whatever, then it makes sense. But yes, in many ways, sometimes I'm like, does anyone actually need to get a hold of me right now? If not, I could probably just turn it off. And that is a great feeling too, just power down.
Hello, lovely Off the Grid listener. Amelia here, interrupting this episode because if you are enjoying this conversation, I really want to encourage you to head to the link in the show notes or your favorite local bookstore's website and purchase a copy of Cody's book, The Practice of Attention. It's a beautiful guide to cultivating presence in our very distracted world. And inside, Cody offers so many reflections, tips, tools, and advice for how we can return to our art and our daily lives over and over again as we step back and away from the addictions and distractions that keep us stuck and far away from our dreams and our goals. I love that this book focuses on the art of presence rather than the science of productivity. And it really helped me feel less pull toward my screen and more pull toward my life, which is Cody's wish for every reader. So again, if you're enjoying this conversation, please head to the link in the show notes to purchase a copy today. We love Cody here on Off the Grid, and I really hope you'll get a copy of their book. Now, back to the conversation. I also wanted to go back to what you said earlier around like the difference between maybe playing a game on your phone or scrolling on social media or, picking up some knitting or scrolling on social media or really any other type of like quote unquote distraction activity we may choose. I appreciated that you were definitely not like moralizing one as right or wrong or better or worse. And also, I just want to add in that I do think that scrolling on social media is like objectively different than those other things because of the way these apps are built to be addictive to our brains. And so what I've noticed is like, even if I'm picking up my phone and playing my block game, after so long, I just get bored or like there are too many ads and I'm over it. Same with like if I pick up some knitting, at a certain point, I just kind of feel done. It's like with many of my just quote unquote distraction activities, like I can close the loop on them. But with social media, there is no loop to close. The entire purpose of those algorithms is to keep those loops open. So you just keep going and going and scrolling and scrolling. And it's like bottomless in that way. And I think that does make it quite different than quote unquote distracting ourselves in other ways. Would you agree?
Yes, I agree. I was doing something the other day and I asked my girlfriend if I could look at something on Instagram because, she does have Instagram. And within a millisecond, I was like, I have to go. I have to go. I have to leave. And I wish I was one of those people who I'm like, my nervous system is just so fragile I'm like, no, my nervous system wants to eat it like cake. Just stick my whole head in there and never leave. I'm not like healed in this way where I'm like, ooh, I don't even want to be in there. Like, it's way more like, I want to be in there. It's like if somebody threw me into a pool of Jello shots at a party, that's not a good place for Cody to be. Like, I mean, it's a little different. It's been almost 15 years. I'm not worried. But like, I don't want to be in a bowl of Jello shots. That not because I'm like, ugh, ew. I'm like, Jello shots. Yeah. It's like Instagram is my Jello shots and I shouldn't be allowed anywhere near it.
No, I appreciate this metaphor. I think it is both like silly and also very clarifying. It makes a ton of sense to me. I think for me, the feeling is maybe slightly different. Like, I don't miss social media. And when I do see it, like on my partner's phone or something, I look at it and I'm like, ugh, I don't want to be in it. So I think like the desire is kind of gone for me. However, I am not at all immune to the addictive tendencies and patterning of it. So there was a point last year where I had the YouTube app on my phone and I found the Shorts tab in it and I would just start scrolling. And there were like a few weeks last year where I would do that for like an hour before bed. And it like suddenly became clear to me that I had gotten looped back in to this type of scrolling that I had rooted out in other areas of my life. And so I deleted the YouTube app from my phone, and it has been easy to just not do it as long as the app isn't there. But I do find that like as every app seems to be turning itself into a social media platform or a like infinite scroll, like I'm not immune to the infinite scroll. Even if I don't desire it the way I used to, it still can suck me in. And I don't know that any of us are immune to it, actually. Like, I think that if you are someone who enjoys being online, that type of like looping, repetitive behavior is something we kind of have to guard against. I hate to think of it that way, but is how I've started to think of it.
I mean, we've known this for so long. We've both been talking about it for over half a decade. It's like, and at the same time, it doesn't fail to like create sadness in me and to be reminded of like, oh, these are really hurting us. They're really like hurting our brains. And it's also so interesting what grabs some of us and doesn't grab others. I've never put the YouTube app on my phone, but I'm sure if I did, it could be dangerous. But it's like I do have the Pinterest app on my phone and use it for like 2 minutes at a time, maybe once or twice a week. And it doesn't hook me. But I know other people who are like, oh, I can't use Pinterest on my phone. It absolutely will loop me out. I mean, it does remind me of there's people who drink normally or take substances in a way that works for them and other people can't. But yeah, there is like a sadness of what the apps do to us. That's scary.
Yeah, it is scary. Okay. Now that we've like spiraled down to the like pit of existential internet dread that we all live inside sometimes, I would love to return to your book because I feel like this is also a bit of the path your book takes. It's a little bit like we're like in Dante's Inferno and we have climbed all the way down the circles of hell. We made it to the bottom. And then in the Inferno, the world flips upside down and you climb back up out to the other side, back to the surface of the world. So we have gotten to the pits of hell with the internet, with the algorithm. And I think that in some ways you do that in a very like nice, loving, gentle way in the first part of your book, right? Because it opens with this chapter on what are we avoiding? It opens with an attention audit, with a digital detox. All of those to me are practices where we are like spiraling and circling in the hard parts of the internet. But what I loved about your book is then the second half does sort of like flip that and offer us all of these practices for how to reclaim, reinvigorate, reimagine, and reconnect with our attention. And so I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about some of them. I'll just list them for curious listeners. You have a chapter on hobby practice, movement practice, creative practice, research practice, and spiritual practice. Could you tell us a little bit about maybe one or two of these and how they've helped you sort of rejuvenate your attention over the past many years?
I love hobby practice, which I feel like is sort of a little bit of what we've been talking about in terms of what are we going towards that isn't social media or that isn't the phone? Is it knitting, playing a video game, watching a documentary, volunteering, getting into a new kind of craft? And so hobbies feel so important to me because they feel like this sort of like healthy distraction that's also extracted from capitalism, because the point of a hobby is you're not trying to make money at it. And it doesn't need to be a part of your business structure. Oftentimes, hobbies become side hustles or do become, many a hobby of mine has become part of my business. See quilting, knitting, Pilates, etc. And I'm always fighting that feeling inside of me of, okay, don't make every hobby into a business or part of my business. So my encouragement there is really to keep a hobby as long as you can. And then in terms of movement, those are the two that are just sticking out to me right now. They feel the most important to me right now, especially, in deep winter here in northern Michigan, of just moving my body even a little bit. Just, I feel like it's so easy to be like, I'm going to walk 5 miles a day or do Pilates or yoga every day, or I'm going to do this New Year challenge, or I'm going to, start running outside. And that's great if you are someone who does those things. And for many of us, my therapist the other day was like, before you jump into a creative advising session with a client, just hold a plank for like 30 seconds, just to get your body activated and warmed up and just feel a little fire in there. And I've been doing that, and it's been so helpful. Because I'll be just maybe sitting for a long time and then oh, I have to talk to somebody. And it kind of gives me some anxiety because I haven't moved my body yet. So then I'll just try to get some movement in. So, and I think a lot about wheelchair users, scooter users, cane users, and just the book also covers just a lot of gentle movement, just even sitting by a window and moving your arms lightly, or laying on your back with your legs up the wall. My movement practice is sometimes rigorous, but I think that same kind of, I think rigorous can also just look like deep devotion to, small movements. So yeah, those are the two that feel the most important to me today.
Yeah, I appreciate both of those. And it feels to me like hobby practice makes so much sense. Knowing that you started this book explicitly with artists in mind, because I do think for artists and for self-employed people, it is so tempting to wrap every single skill or project we have into our business as a money-making endeavor, often because we're just underpaid or under-earning, or we just need more money. And so there's this really twisted logic of well, if I'm going to take the time to do it, I need to make money from it. And so therefore I need to sell it. And that logic is a trap, I think. And it's one I understand. I'm not saying it's anyone's fault for falling in that trap. It is a logic of capitalism that all of our time should be productive. However, I've also just seen how that's a huge drain to everyone's creative energy. And I know this was a big part of your first book, How to Not Always Be Working, which is identifying the hobbies that are work and the ones that are not work or not for sale. And so I think that's always important to circle back to, especially for this audience and your audience. And then with movement, I really appreciate that you offered a sort of range of from gentle to rigorous when we're talking about movement. I always try to be inclusive of all body sizes, types, experiences when this comes up. And I will also say that I felt pretty heartened or encouraged earlier this year when there was a bunch of reporting on new research about the relationship between exercise and depression and the ways that exercise can support sort of like mood stabilizing and uplifting even. And my favorite piece of that research is that they basically in it are like literally doing anything is an exponential gain from nothing.
Yes. Yes. I love that.
It just roots me back in the like small is all of Adrienne Marie Brown, right? Of like all of it can be small. And these small things lead to that like sustaining, which is sort of what we're circling with attention too, is like you can do it in 10 minutes. You can make your art in 10 minutes. And also putting in those reps, to use exercise language, is how we then sustain longer sessions or practices, whether that be in our art practice or a movement practice or a hobby practice. I know you said those two were the ones that stood out to you today, but I'm curious about a few of these other ones, maybe particularly like research practice. How is research practice and attention practice for you? I'd love to hear more.
I love the research chapter feels like the most rogue or something because it's not, I think a lot of people are like, I'm not a researcher. Like, I just have a small business or I'm an artist or whatever. And to me, I'm like, no, like, cultivate your research practice, read books, listen to podcasts, watch documentaries, whatever it is, but like nurturing that part of our attention. My research practice is maybe what I have gained back the most from leaving social media, because social media was like, here is information in a graphic and a short caption. And I was like, I'm understanding things and getting information. And it's true. Like, I talk about this in the book. I don't ever even say I'm anti-social media because I particularly see in social justice movements how much free information can be shared really quickly through social media. So I understand that there is a time and a place for certain people to use social media. And for me, consuming information in that way and not following it out of the app into the source made it so that I wasn't like comprehending information as much. I wasn't like understanding everything that I wanted to. And I'm even thinking about, as we're recording this, we just watched ICE execute someone for the second time in the last few weeks in Minneapolis, Alex Preddy after Renee Good. And I'm just thinking so much about how much I've cried about that. And I didn't used to cry about stuff when I was on social media. Like, it was just kind of like, another person died from our fucked up country, like another bombing in Palestine, another genocide in Sudan. Like, it felt like, if I'm really honest, like a deep numbness. And I think without social media, my research is like, I want to read about these people and know about their lives and know what happened and why it's happening. Like, I want to understand more about my own history, where my own complicity as a white person in the United States, and all of these things, all of that comes back to my research. It comes back to like, how do I understand the world and the violence in the world and the magic in the world? And yes, I'm in a grad program, but I deeply mean research in a very non-academic way. I mean it as just like going to the library and going down rabbit holes and just picking up books that speak to what you're interested in or what you're mad about or what you're sad about, and, seeing what exists there. So yeah, research practice is important to me and lets me do my job as a newsletter writer much better without the fractured attention of reading little blips on social media.
I'm really hearing how research allows you to contextualize what's happening in the world and also what you're creating. such that it actually exists in this broader context of events and identity and history and politics and community and care and your values and all of these things. And you mentioned there that it felt like when you were on social media, you were getting like all this information without much comprehension. And like the research brings in, I think, the context that helps with the comprehension. I also think being off of social media creates the space and the time for the integration, which is then why perhaps we're crying and we're like actually feeling it, because I think that we're experiencing things on multiple levels. I'm also struck by your use of the word information because, you know, that is often what's considered like at stake in attention. Or if we think of the concept of the attention economy, that whole idea is based on this claim that there's so much information out there that we can't take it all in. And I think that social media sometimes is like challenging that because it's like, well, you can just stare at it. Like you can just take it all in. But like, I don't think it actually goes in. It just like goes by. The whole world could go by you and scrolling on a social media platform. But I'm really with you on research as a sort of attention practice that helps that information not just go by, but actually like sink in. So you comprehend it, you integrate it. And from that place, that's where I find you like then desire to act. We can't shift on the level of that desire without actually processing what we're taking in.
Sometimes I feel maybe embarrassed or like I wish that social media gave me a desire to act, but it never really did. Like it never did in the same way that like listening to Democracy Now! A few times a week and looking at my news sources and reading. I have a few newsletters that I read that, you know, kind of give me the information that I used to get on social media. And I'm much quicker to act these days than I was when the urgency of social media was telling me to act right now. And I was like, I don't know if that is getting me to act right now.
And I think that makes sense because with every single social media app, all they want you to do is stay on the app. So it's like you read this thing and you're like, this is horrible. I should do something. What do I do? And then the answer in front of you is just keep scrolling. Maybe reshare this.
Thank you for saying that because I think that is what helps me and reminds me not to be embarrassed. And what I so often tell people and what the book tells people is like, these are designed to keep you in the app only. So yeah, when I sit here, I'm like, I don't know why I don't want to like jump off the couch and get into action. I'm sure some of it is like a freeze response, you know, I can process that with my therapist. But I think also that's why it stopped working for my business in a lot of ways, because I was saying, go to my website, sign up for this class, be a part of this thing with me. But that would have required someone to stop scrolling. And I think we love to scroll is my theory. It's my thesis statement.
Yeah, our brains have definitely been trained to do it. And the dopamine loops tell us it feels good. Even when it doesn't, we just can really get sucked into that. This feels like a really beautiful place to bring in something that you write in the conclusion of your book and maybe kind of move toward closing this conversation. But I really wanted to read a few sentences that you write at the end. So on the penultimate page, you say this, which feels so much like what we were just talking about. You write, "You will inevitably lose your attention again along the way. You will scroll when you want to write, numb out when you want to move, overcommit when you mean to rest. That's okay. Attention is a practice because it requires returning, not because it requires perfection. When you notice yourself drifting, you can begin again. You can close the laptop, step outside, take a breath, and remember that you are allowed to begin again as many times in a day as you need. You can also let this practice ripple outward. The more you reclaim your attention, the more you can be present for your relationships, creative work, and commitments to the world. Your presence can become a quiet offering, a stabilizing force for yourself and others. When we practice attention, we practice care, we practice connection, we practice becoming the kind of people who can meet the world and each other with clarity and kindness."
That's nice, whoever wrote that. Whenever someone reads my own writing, I'm always like, Wow. I don't remember writing that, but I guess I did. And it's so nice to hear. I needed the reminder.
Yeah, as we wrap up, I just kind of wanted to invite you to speak a little bit to another theme of the book that appears here, which is just like anti-perfectionism. And I'm curious, what role has perfectionism played in your attention, and how are you resisting it with these new practices?
One of my favorite books, which I don't talk about publicly very much because of the tradition of anonymity, is the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions book, which is a conference-approved literature of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a anonymous 12-step program. But there is a sentence in there about step 11, which, if you're not familiar, step 11 is about continuing a practice of prayer and meditation. And it says, when these things happen, we should not think too ill of ourselves. And it's talking about not staying in the practice of meditating. And it just says, we should simply resume prayer as soon as we can, doing what we know to be good for us. And resume prayer has been a long-standing little mantra of mine, because the book talks about when, not if, we stop meditating regularly. It's not like, you, dear alcoholic who are trying to heal, you will now meditate forever. Like, it's very like, you, crazy alcoholic, will probably mess this up immediately. So when you do, just simply resume prayer. And I think that's sort of what inspired a lot of what I think about anti-perfectionism and trying to not strive for perfect. It's a huge part of my quilting practice. It's a huge part of my dance practice, my writing practice. All of my practices are really rooted in anti-perfectionism. And, maybe it's also being a Virgo rising. There's so much of me that wants to be not perfect, but like wants to be orderly and on time and not mess up. And anti-perfectionism to me is also about resisting all systems of oppression. I think anyone with any marginalized identity often feels a pressure to be perfect. If you're queer living in a straight world, if you're a person of color living in a white world, if you're a woman living in the patriarchy, these worlds that get built that are so destructive. I think when we hold an identity outside of them, it can feel like there's an expectation to be perfect that I think resisting is really important.
I really appreciate all the different threads you just wove together there. The ways that perfectionism is also like a tenet of white supremacy culture. And so demanding that of ourselves is like upholding the supremacist within ourselves. And also, of course, like those of us who exist in any like experience, live any marginalized identities are perhaps going to feel that even stronger. This like need to live up to a sort of perfection of a standard in order to have access just to like basic life shit, honestly, let alone success, let alone professional accomplishments, or any accomplishments, whatever it might be. And so I think that recognizing where those like demands for perfection can come from, as well as acknowledging our own inner Virgos who might be like, that call might be coming from inside the house for some of us. It's a both and there. I think that is a really important reminder for all of our creative practices, but here especially for attention and what our attention means and needs. So, yeah, I think I really wanted to kind of wrap up on that note. As I mentioned before, as we sort of like wound our way down the circles of hell and then climbed out the other side, I think that it's important to remember that there is no perfect way to make that journey, and there's also no perfect ending to it. I know both you and I run online businesses. We exist in the digital world. We live in, the occupied United States now, and it's just like there's no perfect way to maneuver any of this, but working with our attention, specifically our creative attention, I think can be a really beautiful way to keep going. And that's something I've really taken away from your book. So thank you for writing it. Could you tell listeners how they can connect with you, where they can get the book, and anything else you'd like us to do to support your launch?
Yes. Buy the book from the bookstore or ask your library for it. As much as I'm like, yes, please buy the book, that is the best thing you can do. CodyCook-Parrott.com has links to everything. Also, I'm just so grateful for all of the free ways that you can support this book, which is, asking your local library to order it. You can tell your local bookstore that you're interested in it and order it. You don't even have to buy one of the copies. You can share this episode on a social media app you're not addicted to, or subscribe to my newsletter, which you can also find at CodyCook-Parrott.com. And yeah, I just so appreciate everyone's love and support for this book, and really happy it's in the world.
And listeners in Colorado can come see you and celebrate the publication date, right? Tell us about that. When and where is that happening?
Yes. So March 18th at Boulder Bookstore in Boulder, Colorado, I am doing a reading, and I'm so excited to be there. And it's one of my favorite bookstores. It's massive and amazing. So come stop by.
Thank you so much, Cody, for being here. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Please go buy Cody's book. And until then, we will see you off the grid.
I kinda hate social media, feeds on my brain like a bacteria. If you read my Wikipedia, it'll say I kinda hate social media. Post a picture of myself, sacrifice my mental health, use your product, time to sell. I would rather go to hell. Do you like this? Leave a comment. Can you share this? Will you wear this? Do you like this? Leave a comment. Can you share this? Will you wear this? Okay.
That was an abridged version of Social Media by Surfer Boy and Rectangle. To hear the entire song, find Surfer Boy on Spotify or head to the link in the show notes. Thanks so much to them for sharing the song with us, as well as to Melissa Caitlin Carter, who sings our theme song that you hear at the start of every show. I'm your host, Amelia Fruby, and if you enjoyed this episode, I hope you will download the free Leaving Social Media Toolkit at offthegrid.fun/toolkit. Until next time, I will see you off the grid.